Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Swans Bigfooty Podcast. My name is Bonz. Joining me today we have Vonn.
Hello.
Punts.
Hi guys.
And from the Essendon board, Eth-Dog.
Hey fellas and ladies.
Ladies, who's the second lady here?
It's SM, but he's not actually on the podcast, but I'm sure it's just a shout out.
Yeah, it's a shout out for SM. Now, we're coming off a pretty, I'd say unlucky at times, 10-point loss to Hawthorn. Vonn, do you want to give us your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, well, the way I looked at it was, I mean, if you have a look at it from a purely statistical point of view, it was a very even game. Nothing really stood out. But actually watching it, I didn't honestly think that we were outclassed or, we were outplayed in any real way. I felt like we probably at the start didn't capitalise as much when we had momentum. I know that the scoring shots were equal, but I just felt as though, I guess some of the goals we missed were ones that I think we would have gotten if it wasn't such a high-pressure game in a 70,000 crowd stadium. But, yeah, I'm not making excuses. There were some really good standout performances. Kudos to Smith for taking Gunston pretty much out of the game.
Wait. Smith on Gunston? Wasn't he on Bruce?
Rampy, you mean?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Rampy, yeah. Kudos to Rampy. I thought he played a really, really great game. And, it's one of those games where I don't feel like you can take too much out of it. We played really well in patches. They played really well in patches. So, yeah, on to next week.
I'll give my thoughts on the game before we cross over to punts. Look, it was an interesting performance. I think it was really disappointing that our midfield didn't really get any proper momentum behind it until very late in the last quarter. Like, in most games this year, we're not going to see Kieran Jack, Josh Kennedy, McVeigh all have quiet games. It was interesting watching from the outside. I do want to give a shout out to Gary Rowan's performance on the weekend, though. It was a couple of those run-down tackles coming across as the third man in defence. He was really good on the weekend. I think we've been saying it every week since he's nearly been back over the last 3 weeks, but this was he may not have only gotten much of the ball, but it was his best game by far for us. I really rate how he's playing in the back line, and punts, you called it. Well done. May as well give us your thoughts on the game.
Yeah, well, that was one positive to come out of it. I thought Gary played, as you said, his best game for the club. A couple of times he come across in front of Roughhead, and a couple of times on the wing there he come across and smash into the pack. So obviously the leg's feeling good and he's getting a bit of confidence about himself. As you said, he didn't get a whole lot of the ball, but that'll come with confidence. He did have the 9 disposals. A couple of times he took off and ran through the middle, which he should only get better as time goes on. Remember, that was his second game off the halfback flank at senior AFL level. So, and as you said, he's run down tackles like no one could get Bruce last night. He pushed off Grundy, he pushed off Smith, he pushed off Malcheski, and Rowan was the one that got him down. He's a manic tackler, Rowan is, and he's lost no pace, and he'd have to be one of the best tacklers, if not at the club. He's probably the best tackler. I thought, last night was his best game for the club by a mile. To have the midfield get absolutely spanked was a disappointment. Ben McGlynn stood up. Besides that, Kennedy, Parker, 15 disposals. McVeigh, 20 disposals, but no influence on the game whatsoever. Jack, 21 disposals, was down again. They just had no influence on the game. A couple of Jack's disposals where he just popped it over the top to Jake Lloyd at the centre half back there. He nearly could have put Jake Lloyd in hospital. Bloody Hodge coming across and giving him one. Gave it to Rampy in the back line. Just a couple of errors, and probably the younger guys too. Harry and Lloyd did a few good things, but when the game was on the line, they didn't. Either of them really sort of stepped up to the next level. Tippett's obviously not match fit yet. He's only going to get better. But yeah, even Malcheski's, not many possessions as well. It was an interesting game. I just think there was a lot to take out of it. As you said, midfield-wise, run off half-back, just a bit of a dull game, and hopefully they can pick it up this week against Essendon. One thing I think they moved the ball from their back line. I know Longmire said at the start of the week that they didn't want to move the ball from the back line to the forward line with ease. Well, there was a couple of times they did that with ease. Birchall coming out of the back line, hit up a couple of targets, and they just ran it straight up there, which was pretty disappointing on transition from Sydney, considering they pinpointed it at the start of the week.
One player I was actually very happy was our sub choice on the weekend. Towers showed a lot. 7 disposals in a quarter, a goal assist. He was pretty effective up on the wing, and he gave a bit of a contest. What were your thoughts on that, Vonn?
Well, one bit of play stands out for me with Towers. I can't remember at what point, but it was very late in the fourth quarter, and he didn't really panic, and he actually took a few guys on, and I thought he won. And that was in our forward 50, and I think that was the goal assist you were talking about, actually.
It was a handball off to, it was a assist to assist.
But I just thought it was really impressive that, someone who's playing, their second game of AFL football, they have the actual guts to do a play with so much risk at that point in the game. I thought that was very impressive and spoke a lot about his character. Look, I'm really surprised, and I'm a bit disappointed that so many people on the board want him dropped. I didn't think he was that bad at all. I thought, considering the circumstances, he actually played quite well. But, hey, I also saw people calling for Goods to be dropped. So, yeah, can't take too much out of that.
Okay, Eth-Dog, we may as well go for a neutral opinion. What was your thoughts on the game?
It was a really good game. I enjoyed it. I thought the umpiring was horrendous, as usual, except for number one, Chris Donlan. He's probably the best umpire in the AFL. The player that stood out to me from a Sydney perspective, as I said before, was Rampy. He absolutely killed Gunston. I barely saw Gunston for most of the game. And, yeah, I liked Towers' last quarter as well. He seemed so calm under pressure to me, and his pace, I think we saw a glimpse of it on Saturday night. He's going to be really, really hard to run down from an Essendon perspective, because we haven't. The only player that's quick enough to match him would be Travis Collier. And how tall is Towers?
189 centimetres.
6'2", so yeah.
6'2", yeah. Collier's 5'10", so we've really got no match for him from an Essendon perspective, and he scares me as a player. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's interesting actually to see your thoughts on an Essendon, or from looking into the Essendon game. Is there anything that you saw Hawthorn do on the weekend that you think Essendon will try and replicate?
I think we need to shut down Malcheski. That's really important to Sydney, in my view, especially with Shaw out at the moment. Yeah, he's really the key playmaker for Sydney, and I think it was Simpkin did a really good job on him, and whereas it may be the Channel 7 commentary team made a really good point about his lack of influence on Saturday night.
Do you think you put Winderlick on him?
Licken, he's been playing mostly off half-back recently. He absolutely killed Port and Collingwood from there. And Yeah, so he was in the back half mostly, and it seems to be turning around for him there. The player we might put on him would be Ben Howard if he's playing, if not maybe Jake Melcham. They're the two sort of possibilities in my head.
And Joe Danaher and Tom Bellchambers, they obviously Joe's there.
They're not playing. They're not going to play.
Not even Bellchambers?
Nah, he's re-injured his ankle and is out for another 2 or 3 weeks, I think.
I thought Joe Danaher would be touch and go for this weekend.
Nah,
He only had surgery.
Cracked shoulder blade, so he's not going to be back for 3 weeks, I think. It said.
That's a lucky break for us. Danaher would be a really hard matchup if he's up there with Carlisle.
Yeah. We don't really have Carlisle will probably have to play second ruck as well, which is really unfortunate unless we decide to make Hooker follow Tippett into the ruck if Tippett does play as your second ruck.
It'll be Sam Reid who plays as the second ruckman. We won't be moving Tippett into the ruck at any point this season. He might take a couple of forward 50 throw-ins, but apart from that, it'll be Sam Reid around the ground.
Yeah.
We're not going to risk Tippett's knee.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, that makes it awkward for us because Hooker's the ideal matchup for Tippett, and we don't want Paddy rocking all day, and, well, we haven't got any other key forwards or who are tall enough to move into the ruck.
So who do you think will come in for... Because I heard that Bellchambers was training, but obviously I'm wrong. You'd know more about that than me. But obviously you will bring in Hardingham. Is that his name? You probably think for Joe Danaher as another sort of tall forward?
Hardingham's... he's a pseudo tall forward. We might bring in...
your third tall forward, yeah?
Yeah, definitely a third tall forward because he's not very tall. He's 184 centimetres, I think, just above 6 foot, but he plays like a tall.
Yep.
Or a small. We could bring in Tate Pez because he's been playing forward in the VFL, and the last one we might bring in is Ariel Steinberg, who's been absolutely killing it in the VFL this year. He's a rookie-listed player, and we have quite a few long-term injuries, so we might promote him and bring him in, but he'll probably take a key defensive post if it does come up.
I guess this is probably more of a general question. I've watched, I think the last 2 Essendon games I've watched recently have been against the Bulldogs and against Port. And I just want to know, I guess, from your perspective, how you think the team's playing. Because I thought you guys were, well, I didn't actually watch the game, but I'm presuming you must have been great against Collingwood, who admittedly aren't at their best right now. But, and then I thought the performance against the Bulldogs was a bit lucky because I thought Carlisle really saved you. So I don't know, where do you think Essendon are at right now?
I think we'll make the 8. I think that much is clear because after you guys, we've got a pretty good draw. But our form, we have a habit of playing well against good sides and playing poorly against poor sides. So, but we always seem to manage to take away the wins against the poor sides and not really get over the top against the good sides. The thing about the game against the Bulldogs is our defensive pressure, which is normally there, wasn't. Our defence was shuffled and it was a shambles, and normally when we score 100 and something points, we win by 5 or 6 goals against a side like the Bulldogs. And from that aspect, it was disappointing. But, yeah, if our defence isn't mucked around this week, I think we'd be a fair chance of putting in a good performance.
Now, I wanted to ask you, actually, Eth-Dog, is there any chance that Carlisle could be moved into defence this weekend simply because of Tippett, Franklin, Reid and Goods?
I would say no, because even though you have heaps of tall forwards, he and Ambrose are pretty much our last. So we can't afford to go that small against... Last time we went with a really small forward line, which was against Freo, McFarlane and Johnson just had a field day cutting off attacks, and an old bomber, Ted Richards and Heath Grundy, would pretty much do the same if we tried that again. And our percentage, we're only a bit above Adelaide on percentage, so we can't really afford to drop those sort of games, drop that sort of percentage again.
Okay. Now, from a Swans point of view, what players did you want to try and get out and free this weekend? Main reasons we need to improve from the Hawthorn game.
Oh, the midfield. Clearly. Parker, McVeigh, I can name them all. Pretty much the whole midfield. Obviously, Malcheski had a bad game. His run-off half-back is pivotal, so he needs to step it up. Just pretty much across the board. I thought the forwards played well, so not too worried about that issue. Sam Reid is another one that I was going to ask you about. We'll have this conversation. I know I'm not throwing throwing out the window, but is it about time they put him at centre half back? I don't know. Maybe not.
I don't think we need to bring him into centre half back this weekend. I mean,
not this week.
Started talking about Essendon not really having many tall forward options. Let's stretch them down in defence.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What about Dustin Fletcher? Is he going to get a gig this week with the form that he showed against the Western Bulldogs?
Yeah.
Yep.
He's old. He plays an occasional bad game. It happens. It doesn't. I don't think it matters that much. With the forward line you've got, we can't really afford to drop tall defenders. He'll probably take Reid this week, and I'd back him to break even against Reid at the very least.
Thinking about it, Fletcher would actually be a decent matchup for Reid. Reid really relies on his agility and his reach, and that's something that Fletcher's relied on in defence for several years now, especially with his go-go Gadget Fletcher arm. So, if from an Essendon point of view, he would actually be an ideal matchup for Reid. Who do you see taking Goods?
It'll be either Dempsey or Hibberd. I think Hibberd struggled with him last time, but he's probably better on the marking types, but if we want him free to set up our attacks, unlike last week, we'd probably go Dempsey. Dempsey's got the pace, and I think he's played on Goods before. I can't remember when. I think it might have been that game where Goods missed after the siren, but yeah, one of them.
It's interesting, actually. I'd be very worried going ahead as to which defender is playing on Goods, because as we saw on the weekend, whilst he's a fantastic attacking option for us right now in the form he's in, he's struggling defensively. He allowed a lot of Hawthorn's run out of defence was on the directed marking man of Goods. Vonn, do you have any thoughts on the matter?
Well, I thought that Goods probably. Well, in all honesty, I actually thought that we let Gibson get loose a lot. I didn't actually pinpoint that specifically so much on Goods. I guess I didn't really notice his opponent running off him too much. But that being said, I think at this point, even though, in my opinion, he played probably his best game for us since he's come back from injury, I still would prefer him in the forward line than in the midfield. But I can't say that I noticed too much defenders peeling off him a lot.
Okay, Punts, what are your thoughts on the matter?
Definitely at the ground, you could tell that Goods was getting run off easily in the first half. He obviously kicked into gear in the second half, but his little cameo, he probably should have had 5 goals on the board, maybe even 6. He did miss one. I don't know. It's interesting. He might be exploited. Maybe not this week. Maybe if they go with Dempsey might get a run on off him. I don't know. It's an interesting one, Goods, because as you said, he can do. His first half was looked terrible to me. He just got ran off easy and didn't look like I was actually calling for him to be subbed. But then the second half, look what he did. So it's an interesting prospect, but it's just to be run off like he did in the first half, not good for anyone. I know his straight line running's still there, but he can't turn anymore. It's that obvious. There's no way that he'll be playing anywhere near the midfield wing this year, I wouldn't think. He'll just be deep forward like he was. So, I don't know. It's an interesting one. I can't say what will happen with him.
That's actually really interesting you say that, because, obviously, watching it on TV, you don't have the benefit of seeing the footage that's not on TV. I guess I didn't really, even in the performances this year, he hasn't been that great. But, that being said, we were winning. So it did kind of gloss over individual performances. But if that is the case, then, it's not worth him playing in the midfield. But where can we play him? He's got to be in the forward line, and I just cannot see him being dropped. I actually wouldn't even mind him starting as sub, which might be a bit unpopular, but I think.
Well, would you like to go up to John Longmire and recommend telling him he starts as sub? I don't think Goods will take that too well.
Yeah, I'll go up to John Longmire and you say that, but you have to go up to Goods and tell him.
Oh, no. you get the orders from Longmire and then tell Goods yourself. I'm going to be down here in Melbourne. I'm fine.
Yeah, no, you won't be down here in Melbourne, actually. You'll be in Sydney, but, semantics.
Now, I may as well actually go to Sure Thing, Worst Nightmare, and, well, final prediction for this week. Vonn.
Okay, I just want to say, sometimes I listen back on the podcast, and everyone's sure thing is that we're going to win, or that we're going to lose. So I'm going to be a bit more specific this time and say that I think Carlisle is going to have a very quiet game. I think he's going to kick a goal. My worst nightmare is unrelated to this week. I hope Hannah's isn't carrying anything too serious, because we showed how much we missed his outside running and his inside work. So that's my worst nightmare. My prediction is Sydney by, depends on weather, probably either 20 to 60.
Okay, Eth-Dog, your Sure Thing, Worst Nightmare, and final prediction.
Sure Thing, Ryder will beat Pike in the ruck, because Ryder's form has been excellent this year, and Pike, he's been so-so from what I've seen. Worst nightmare, Buddy does Buddy stuff, and against Essendon specifically. And what was the third one?
Final prediction.
Final prediction, Sydney by 15, Buddy to kick 6.
Okay, Punts. Sure Thing, Worst Nightmare, and final prediction?
Sure Thing is Luke Parker to bounce back and have 26 disposals and 3 goals. And worst nightmare, pretty much like every week I've said, it's 5 weeks out from finals now. No injuries. And final prediction is, I think Buddy will kick 4-6 and we'll win by 33 points.
Okay, my sure thing for this week is Towers to get a full game, not to be sub. My worst nightmare, I agree with Vonn, the Hanbury injury. I want to hear a decent I know Longmire has said he's only a small chance to play this week, but I do want to hear that he's progressing and will be back the week after. We can't afford for him to be out for too much longer. He's better when he plays a series of games and gets into some form. And my final prediction, I'm going to predict the Swans by about 8 points. I rate Essendon quite highly, and I think they'll push us all the way. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening to this week.
Wait. Everyone said how many goals they think Buddy will kick.
I haven't yet.
Let's specifically choose a number, and the person who is the most off has to lose a bet to whoever gets it spot on.
Okay, I reckon Buddy will kick 3.
I think he'll kick 5.
And Punts, it was 4 goals, 6, correct?
4 goals.
4 goals.
6,
okay.
You'll have 10 shots on goal on the weekend.
Okay, got it. Eth-Dog, do you want to be in on this bet?
No.
Okay, guys. Anyways, thank you for listening to this week's edition of the Swans Bigfooty Podcast. Have a great night.